advent of nightfall. Fires flared to the west, and she could hear the rumbling of rioters from that direction. They were very near. Isabel shivered and hurried to where Harold and the other footman were bent over a figure on the ground. Pinckney had probably mistaken the costume, or the man, or the mask, or... But no. Isabel drew in a sharp breath. She'd never seen the notorious ghost of St. Giles in person, but she had no doubt at all that this must be him. The prone man wore black and red motley. His floppy-brimmed black hat had fallen from his head, and she could see that his brown hair was tied back simply. A short sword was sheathed at his side, and a long sword lay by one broad hand. A black half-mask with a ridiculously long nose covered the upper half of his face, leaving his square chin and wide mouth revealed. His lips were parted over straight white teeth, the upper lip a little bigger than the bottom. Isabel snapped her attention up to her footman. "Is he alive?" "He's still breathing, at least, m'lady." Harold shook his head. "Don't know for how long, though." A shout came from nearby, and the sound of smashing glass. "Put him in the carriage," Isabel said. She bent to pick up his hat. Will, the second footman, frowned. "But, m'lady—" "Now! And don't forget his sword." Already she could see a mass of people rounding the corner down the street. The footmen glanced at each other, then as one lifted the ghost. Harold grunted under the weight, but he made no complaint. A crowd gathered at the end of the street, and someone gave a shout. The rioters had spotted the carriage. Isabel picked up her skirts and trotted after her footman. Harold gave a great heave and dumped the ghost and his sword into the carriage. Isabel scrambled rather inelegantly inside. Pinckney was staring wide-eyed at the ghost sprawled on the floor of the carriage, but for the moment, Isabel ignored him. She tossed the hat on top of him, lifted her seat, and withdrew 2 pistols from the hidden compartment underneath. Pinckney squeaked in alarm. Isabel turned and handed the pistols to the footman at the carriage door. "Don't let anyone climb the carriage." Harold's jaw tightened. "Yes, m'lady." He took the pistols, gave one to Will, and mounted the running board behind the carriage. Isabel closed the carriage door and knocked on the roof. "Fast as you can, John." The carriage started forward with a lurch, just as something hit the side. "M'lady!" Pinckney cried. "Hush," Isabel said. There was a lap robe on the maid's seat, and Isabel tossed it over the ghost. She sat back on her own seat, clutching the window as the carriage rocked around a corner. Something else knocked against the carriage. A grimacing face appeared suddenly at the window, its tongue smearing lewdly against the glass. Pinckney screamed. Isabel stared at the man, her heart racing, but her gaze steady as she met his eyes. They were bloodshot and filled with maddened rage. The carriage jolted, and the man fell away. One of the pistols fired. "M'lady," Pinckney whispered, her face white. "The dead man—" "Not quite dead man," Isabel muttered, eyeing the robe. Hopefully anyone glancing inside would see a robe thrown carelessly on the floor, not the hidden ghost of St. Giles. She braced herself as the carriage swung wildly around a corner. "Not quite dead man," Pinckney obediently repeated. "Who is he?" "The ghost of St. Giles." Pinckney's robin's egg blue eyes widened. "Who?" Isabel stared at her lady's maid in exasperation. "The ghost of St. Giles? The most notorious footpad in London? Goes about in a harlequin's costume, either ravishing and murdering, or rescuing and defending, depending on whose stories you believe." If Pinckney's eyes got any bigger, they might fall out of her head altogether. "No?" Isabel waved a hand toward the window and the shouting and screaming outside and said sweetly, "The man that mob wants dead?" Horrified, Pinckney stared at the robe. "But why, m'lady?" The second pistol fired with a deafening boom. Pinckney jumped and looked wildly out the window. Dear God.